You ever notice how something as small, as ordinary, as completely overlooked as a grain of salt can do what entire armies of fear and doubt fail to do? It's funny, really. People spend their whole lives searching for some grand weapon, some mystical force, some towering miracle to break the curses they swear are haunting them. But the answer, the answer sits right there on every table, untouched, underestimated, ignored. A tiny crystal that doesn't roar, doesn't glow, doesn't announce its power. Yet it walks into darkness and doesn't flinch. It touches what is rotten and makes it clean. It steps into corruption and refuses to be corrupted. It takes what is decaying and stops it cold. Salt's quiet power proves strength doesn't need noise. Funny, isn't it? How everyone walks around shouting, bragging, puffing their chests, as if volume alone could bend reality. As if screaming your importance makes you important. But salt, salt works in silence. It doesn't argue. It doesn't plead. It doesn't beg for attention. It simply times, is asterisk, and what it is powerful. So powerful it can preserve what the world tries to rot, cleanse what life tries to stain, and break what others whisper over you in the dark. People underestimate it because it's small, simple, ordinary. They overlook it the same way they overlook themselves, thinking, how can something so tiny do anything that matters? And that's the first curse it breaks, this belief that only the loud, the big, the flashy deserve to be taken seriously. But the real strength, the kind that rewrites your life, it moves quietly. Picture this: a room full of noise, chaos, people talking over each other, fighting to be seen. And right there in the middle sits a single grain of salt. It doesn't move. Yet everything depends on it. Without it, food spoils. Without it, flavor dies. Without it, nourishment becomes something you push away. Doesn't that sound familiar? You've been treating your presence the same way. You think you need to shake the earth to matter. You think you need to prove yourself to people who wouldn't taste the difference between truth and a lie if both were poured into their hands. But the moment you understand your quiet strength, your stillness, your clarity, you stop dancing for approval. You stop kneeling for acceptance. You stop giving your power away because you finally understand you were the power all along. Salt does what it does because it knows exactly what it is. It doesn't try to be sugar. It doesn't pretend to be spice. It stays true, consistent, unchanging. And that's why curses break around it. See, curses cling to confusion. They thrive where identity is lost. They wrap themselves around people who don't know who they are anymore. But salt, it's too pure for that, too certain, too focused. And the moment you start living the same way, knowing your worth without needing applause, knowing your purpose without needing permission, everything that tried to cling to you slips off. Every whisper meant to harm you loses its grip. Every shadow that followed you starts choking on its own weakness because you finally realized you don't need to shout to be strong. There's something deliciously unsettling about quiet strength. People don't expect it. They can't measure it. They can't control it. Noise is predictable. Silence, that's dangerous. Silence makes people lean in. Silence makes them wonder. Silence makes them nervous. And when you finally understand the weight of being steady, calm, unmoved, like salt, resting exactly where it belongs, everyone who misjudged you starts sensing something they can't name, something shifting, something breaking. And maybe that's the real trick. The world taught you to believe you needed to be loud to be free. But the truth is, that noise is often a mask worn by those terrified of being seen as they are. Salt doesn't need to hide behind sound. It works in the unseen corners, slipping into wounds and healing them, slipping onto food and transforming it, slipping into places curses once lived and pushing them out as easily as a flame burns paper. You don't need noise. You don't need spectacle. You don't need anyone clapping while you rise. You just need to understand your own quiet power, the kind that breaks what was meant to break you, the kind that purifies what tried to poison you, the kind that sits patiently until the moment it's needed and then changes everything. With the smallest touch, purity destroys curses. The moment consistency becomes a habit. Ah, that's the part nobody likes to hear. Everyone wants miracles, lightning bolts, instant rescue. They love the idea of something swooping down and snapping every chain in one dramatic moment. But purity, real purity, it doesn't come from spectacle. It comes from repetition, from doing the same small, right thing over and over until the wrong things lose their power. You know, the world fears someone who stays consistent, someone who wakes up every day and chooses clarity when chaos is easier, integrity when shortcuts look tempting, discipline when distraction whispers sweet little lies. Curses cling to inconsistency. They feed off your back and forth decisions, your almost changes, your half promises to yourself. But the moment you decide, truly decide to stay steady, they starve. People don't realize how consistency changes the texture of their life. At first, it feels boring, almost too simple, like adding a pinch of salt to something bland and not tasting much difference. But keep adding it day after day, choice after choice, and suddenly everything shifts. Suddenly you're not reacting to the world's madness, you're shaping your own. That's what purity really is. Not perfection, but direction. A focused, unwavering direction that nothing contaminated can cling to. Because curses, they're like mold. They don't survive where someone keeps cleaning, keeps clearing, keeps choosing to stay aligned with who they want to become. And the funny part? People think curses are loud. They imagine them as big, dark, dramatic forces swirling around their lives. But the truth is far quieter. Curses are subtle. They slip into bad habits, into self-doubt, into the lies you repeat to yourself when no one is listening. They settle into your routines and pretend to be part of you. They whisper, "This is just who you are. This is just how life goes." But when you start practicing purity, when you start refusing to entertain what drains you, refusing to repeat what wounds you, refusing to become what hurts you, you break their illusion. And illusions hate being exposed. Consistency is dangerous to anything trying to control you. It makes you predictable in all the right ways. Predictable to yourself. You stop being surprised by your own collapse. You stop sabotaging your own steps. You stop letting your emotions drag you around like some puppet on a broken string. And little by little, the things that once weighed you down begin to fall off. Not because someone snapped their fingers, but because you stopped feeding them. You stopped giving them a home. You stopped giving them a reason to stay. Imagine a person who cleans their space every day, just a little. A corner here, a shelf there. Nothing dramatic, nothing Instagram-worthy. But over time, their entire environment becomes unrecognizable, fresh, calm, in order. Now imagine someone doing the same inside themselves, clearing one thought, one habit, one reaction, one excuse, every single day. Do you understand what kind of power that creates? Do you see how curses don't stand a chance against someone like that? They rely on chaos. They survive in clutter. They thrive in inconsistency. But purity, steady, simple purity, turns their playground into a barren wasteland. People fear discipline because it looks strict, but what they should really fear is the version of themselves that appears when they refuse discipline. The version that's lost, directionless, easy to break. Consistency may demand effort, but inconsistency demands your entire life, and most people will give it willingly, never realizing they're handing themselves over piece by piece. But you're beginning to see the pattern. You're starting to understand that every time you choose clarity over confusion, every time you choose intentional action over impulse, every time you choose purity over the easy path, something dark inside you cracks a little more. Something ancient and heavy begins to crumble. Because the moment consistency enters your life like a quiet rhythm, curses lose the grip they once bragged about having. They're not as strong as they pretend. They were only strong because you kept letting them stay. Darkness loses when you become the barrier that decay cannot cross. Now that's an image people don't like to picture. They prefer to think of darkness as something unbeatable, something massive, something bigger than them. They imagine it as a monster with claws and teeth and shadows that drip off its shoulders. But darkness is far more fragile than that. All it takes is one boundary, one line drawn with intention, one person who finally decides, nothing gets past me anymore. And suddenly the thing that once intimidated you starts shrinking. Decay doesn't just appear overnight. It starts small. A crack in the wall, a corner left wet, a door left open when no one's watching. And before you know it, rot has slipped inside. Not because it was powerful, but because no one stopped it. That's how negativity works too. How self-doubt works. How curses work. They don't break down your life with a hammer. They seep in through the places you refuse to guard. Through the thoughts you entertain even though they poison you. Through the people you let near you even though they drain everything good from your spirit. Through the habits you know are killing you slowly, but you still allow them because they feel familiar. You want to know the secret to stopping decay? You become salt, not the seasoning, the barrier, the protector, the thing that makes decay impossible. Salt doesn't negotiate with rot. It doesn't compromise. It doesn't say, come in, but only a little. It draws a line around what matters and dares anything corrupted to cross it. And here's the twisted little truth. When you become that kind of barrier, darkness doesn't fight, it flees. It knows it can't survive where someone has finally chosen to stand firm. People underestimate the power of saying no. Not the weak, shaky no that hopes someone understands, but the kind of no that locks every door to the past and refuses to let a single shadow slip through the cracks. A no that preserves your peace. A no that protects your future. A no that stops the cycle of decay that's been running through your life for far too long. When you start saying that kind of no, oh, the darkness hates it. Because it thought it owned you. It thought it knew your patterns. It thought you would always break right on schedule. But then you became the barrier, the boundary, the wall it could no longer push through. Look around your life. Every place where darkness settled, there was no barrier. Every place where something died emotionally, spiritually, mentally, there was an open door. A place you didn't guard because you didn't believe you deserved to. But the moment you understand your worth, really understand it, you stop letting anything decay you from the inside out. You become protective of your energy, selective with your time, unavailable to chaos. And suddenly the forces that once stalked you start stumbling. They start losing their grip. They start realizing the game has changed and you're no longer the easy target they fed on. Decay hates strength. It hates clarity. It hates people who stop apologizing for wanting a cleaner life. So when you become the barrier, when you become the force that keeps what is unworthy from crossing into your inner world, darkness has no strategy left. It can't corrupt you if you won't let it in. It can't break you if you refuse to open the door. It can't rot your spirit if you decide you're done hosting the things that were killing you. And the most fascinating part? That strength doesn't appear with some dramatic transformation. It shows up the moment you stop accepting decay as normal. The moment you stop pretending you can handle just a little. The moment you decide you're finished letting darkness nibble at your joy, your goals, your identity. That's when you become the barrier. That's when your presence alone tells the darkness, try it, just try it. And it won't, because it knows that once someone chooses to protect their inner world with intention, decay becomes impossible, darkness becomes powerless, and the things that once haunted you start trembling the moment you stand your ground. Curses survive only where discipline is absent. Isn't that fascinating? People walk around blaming shadows, bad luck, enemies, jealous eyes, ancient whispers, anything except their own lack of structure. They imagine curses as these wild, supernatural beasts lurking in the corners, ready to jump on them at any moment. But the truth is much less mysterious and far more uncomfortable. Curses don't thrive because they're powerful. They thrive because people refuse to take control of their daily lives. They slip into the empty spaces you leave open. They cling to the cracks created by your lack of direction. They feed off every moment you say, I'll fix it tomorrow, knowing you won't. Discipline. Oh, that's what really scares people. Not darkness, not curses, not misfortune discipline. Because discipline asks you to show up consistently, relentlessly, even when no one is watching, even when you don't feel like it, even when everything around you is screaming that giving up would be easier. Curses adore the undisciplined because there's nothing guarding the door, nothing pushing back, nothing telling them, not today. When you live without discipline, your life becomes a house with every window open, every lock broken, every light turned off. Anything can wander in and make itself comfortable, and it does. Look closely at any area of your life that feels cursed: relationships, money, health, confidence, purpose, and you'll see the same pattern. A lack of consistent action, a lack of rules you actually follow, a lack of boundaries you actually enforce. People think curses break suddenly, like watching a chain snap with one dramatic pull. But most curses die quietly, the moment you start doing what you know you should have been doing all along. That small daily action, the one you keep avoiding, that's the blade that cuts through the rope around your life. But here's the tricky part. Discipline doesn't feel magical at first. It feels annoying, uncomfortable, repetitive, like dragging your feet through mud. And that's why so few people stay with it long enough to witness the shift. Meanwhile, the curses you fear, they rely on this. They rely on you quitting right before the breakthrough. They rely on you hitting snooze, skipping the work, delaying the healing, avoiding the truth. They rely on you thinking that effort is optional when it's the only thing that changes anything. Imagine someone sweeping their floor every day. Just 10 minutes. Nothing dramatic, nothing impressive. Over time, their home stays clean. Dust never gets the chance to settle. Now imagine someone who never sweeps, never tidies, never organizes, and then complains that the mess is overwhelming. That's how discipline works with your life. Those tiny, boring steps keep everything dark from building up. They stop curses from finding places to stick. Without discipline, everything piles up: resentment, regret, fear, confusion, wasted potential, and suddenly it feels like you're drowning, and you call that a curse, when really it was neglect. People romanticize chaos because they're afraid of structure. Structure demands responsibility. It demands honesty. It demands you stop blaming the universe for what you're allowing. Curses only have authority in the spaces you refuse to manage. So imagine what happens when you finally take control, when you build routines that strengthen you, when you protect your time with an iron grip, when you stop entertaining things that weaken your mind, when you stop feeding habits that poison your future. The curses don't fight back, they evaporate. They can't survive discipline. They can't survive consistency. They can't survive a person who wakes up every day and makes choices on purpose. There's something beautifully unsettling about a disciplined person, something that unsettles every force that once preyed on them. Because discipline makes you predictable to yourself and unpredictable to anything that used to manipulate you. It creates a rhythm so strong that nothing dark can break through it. It builds a structure so solid that nothing rotten can get in. And the curses that had you trembling, they start trembling instead, realizing their playground has become a fortress, and you're no longer someone they can cling to. The smallest daily actions carry the greatest transformative force. Oh, but people hate hearing that. They want fireworks, revolutions, grand gestures that shake the sky. They want something dramatic enough to blame or worship. They want a single moment that changes everything so they don't have to change anything themselves. But transformation, real transformation, hides in the tiny choices you think don't matter. The ones you brush off, the ones you skip, the ones you tell yourself you'll do later. It's almost funny how people overlook the microscopic power sitting right in front of them simply because it doesn't look impressive. Small things rarely do. But small things, they accumulate, they stack, they grow teeth when ignored and become wings when repeated. Take salt, for instance, a grain so tiny you can barely grip it between your fingers. But add enough of those grains, day after day, and suddenly you're preserving entire worlds from decay. That's the trick life plays on you. It hides the big changes inside little motions. Waking up 5 minutes earlier, drinking a glass of water, reading a single page, saying no to one distraction, choosing not to respond to something beneath you. These things look insignificant, laughable, too gentle to make any impact. But watch what happens when they repeat. Watch what grows from them. Watch what breaks because of them. People underestimate tiny actions because they don't give immediate rewards. And humans are creatures addicted to immediacy. If it doesn't explode on the first try, they label it useless. But curses, failure, weakness, they don't crumble from a single punch. They erode, slowly. Exactly the same way they built themselves in your life. Tiny habits, tiny compromises, tiny moments you didn't notice until you were buried under them. So why wouldn't the solution work the same way? Small against small, daily against daily. Grain against grain. That's how you dismantle the things that once swallowed you whole. You ever notice how weakness grows quietly? How fear creeps in softly? How doubt whispers instead of shouting? That's because subtlety is powerful. And when you start using that same subtle force, intentional tiny actions, you begin reversing the spell cast over your life. You stop feeding what drains you. You start feeding what strengthens you. And the shift begins, not with an explosion, but with a flicker, a tiny spark that most people would ignore. But you're not most people, not anymore. Every curse in your life, every cycle, every repeated downfall, trace it back and you'll find small actions behind it. Skipped tasks, ignored instincts, repeated excuses. You never fell apart in one moment. You fell apart inch by inch. So naturally, you rise the same way, inch by inch. People dream of giant leaps because they don't want to face the truth that their life is built from moments, not milestones. But the ones who understand this, the ones who embrace the small steps, they become unstoppable because they don't rely on motivation. They rely on rhythm, on habits, on consistency that's too subtle for excuses to break. Imagine dripping water onto stone. 1 drop, nothing. 100, still nothing. 1,000, barely noticeable. But keep going, keep dripping, keep applying that tiny pressure day after day. And that stone begins to change shape. Not because the water was strong, but because the water was relentless. Small and relentless. That's what the smallest daily actions turn you into, a force that can reshape anything, outlast anything, erode anything that once towered over you. Most people want to skip the small steps because they think those steps make them look weak or slow. But here's the twist. The ones who master small daily actions move faster in the long run than the ones who chase big dramatic moments. Because small actions don't depend on mood. They don't depend on circumstance. They don't depend on luck. They become a part of you. They build a version of you that's stable, controlled, impossible to manipulate. And curses hate that. They hate when someone becomes consistent in the tiny things. They hate when someone chooses one simple improvement every day. They hate when someone stops ignoring the small actions that actually change everything. Because once that begins, once that daily rhythm sets in, once you realize how much power hides in what looks insignificant, the curses know they're finished. They know they can't survive your patience, your repetition, your quiet persistence. They crumble the same way they formed, bit by bit. Becoming salt means becoming untouchable by what once controlled you. And isn't that the part that scares people the most? Not the darkness itself, not the curses, not the whispers hiding in the corners, no. What truly terrifies them is the idea of becoming someone nothing can cling to anymore. Someone who cannot be manipulated by the same old triggers. Someone who cannot be dragged back into old patterns. Someone who no longer reacts the way the world expects. Because once you become that, their grip is gone. Their power dissolves. Their influence crumbles. And they hate that. Salt is a strange little thing. When it enters something, everything changes. When it surrounds something, decay stops. When it touches something, corruption dies. It's pure, steady, unbothered. It doesn't bend to fit the environment. The environment bends to fit times at asterisk. And that's the kind of person you become when you finally understand your worth. When you stop shrinking. When you stop letting old versions of yourself drag your future through the mud. You become the presence that everything must adapt to, not the presence constantly adapting to everything around you. Think about how much of your life was shaped by reactions. Reacting to what someone said. Reacting to what someone did. Reacting to how someone treated you. Reacting to every little negativity thrown your way. You were like water, easy to disturb, easy to influence, easy to contaminate. But salt doesn't dissolve into chaos. It stabilizes. It transforms. It sets the terms. When you finally realize your ability to set the terms of your own life, the things that once toyed with you lose. Their amusement. They lose the ability to twist you. They lose the ability to keep you small. People often think being untouchable means being cold, distant, emotionless. But that's not it at all. It's not about becoming hard, it's about becoming whole. It's about no longer having loose edges where negativity can latch on, no cracks where past wounds can drip back in, no empty spaces waiting to be filled with someone else's poison. Being salt means you've filled those spaces with strength, clarity, self-respect, intention. Nothing rotten can enter because there's simply no room left. You know what makes salt powerful? It doesn't try to please. It doesn't try to fit in. It doesn't water itself down so others feel comfortable. It exists confidently in its purpose. When you do the same, you become unshakable. The insults don't hit the same. The setbacks don't break you the same. The disappointments don't linger the same. You stop absorbing pain and start rejecting it like a body rejecting a foreign object. That's when you know you've become untouchable, not because you don't feel, but because you don't surrender your strength to every emotion that passes through you. And oh, the curses that once fed on your weaknesses, they start choking. They start slipping. They start realizing they can't survive in someone who has become this grounded, this intentional, this purified. You become too steady for chaos, too clear for confusion, too rooted for manipulation, too filled for emptiness. The same problems that once haunted you start sliding off you like water off polished metal. The same temptations that once pulled you in now look pathetic. The same patterns that once owned you crumble because you stopped participating in them. Becoming salt is choosing not to be the victim of your past. It's choosing not to fall back into familiar traps. It's choosing not to let every emotion, every insult, every setback dictate your direction. It's standing there with that quiet, unsettling calm and letting everything that once controlled you realize it no longer can. They can scream, they can push, they can pull, they can taunt, but you won't move. Not like before, not the way they expect. And that's when the shift happens. When the things that once held authority over your life start losing their confidence in themselves. Because you're not bending anymore. You're not breaking at the predictable points. You're not acting like the fragile version of you they learned to manipulate. You've become something else entirely, something pure, steady, and strangely unbreakable. Something that stands between your life and anything that tries to rot it. Something that breaks curses simply by existing. You've become salt, and salt doesn't apologize for being untouchable.